Are we on? Is this working? Can you let me know if this is working? I've been trying to, okay, let me just put in the chat. Can you see/hear me? There. Okay. Apologize for taking too long. I was having some technical difficulties. Uh, this was supposed to be much nicer, but that'll have to wait until next month. So hello, my name is Jamie. If we haven't met yet, I am the language coach, and I am here to answer some questions that I've been asked. There should be, yes, if you go to the pinned comment up in the chat, there is the link to the where you can ask questions I'm going to be answering. I have three right now, and if you submit that form while we're here, then obviously I'll answer your question. If you ask it in the chat, I can also probably see it. This is my first time going live on YouTube, so bear with me. That's why I'm late. That's why everything's like a mess. I'm also in Florida where there's a hurricane right now. So let's get right to it. So the first question, and I got this question from three different people just this week. So I'm going to answer it right now. The question is, how do you convince yourself that you can learn a language? This is a really common problem. People feel like they can't learn a language for whatever reason. Maybe they've been told by teachers, maybe they've been told by their friends, and maybe they've tried to do it in the past and they haven't been able to, and happens all the time. The first thing that I recommend when people ask me, "How do you convince yourself you can do it?" It's not about, like, telling yourself that you can do it until eventually you believe it. I mean, it is at some point once you get there, but it takes a minute, and the first step that I would recommend is understanding what makes you think you can't. Okay, and I say that because, I can sit here and say all day, "Oh, just say that you can do it, eventually you'll believe it." But not thinking that you are unable to learn language is just a symptom of a bigger problem. And the problem is different with everybody. Everybody has different experiences, everybody has different insecurities, um, and everybody has different histories with language learning. So the first step is, what makes you think you can't? Okay, so for example, if somebody says, I feel like I can't learn a language because I have tried over and over to learn a language and it hasn't worked. Super common. I've also totally experienced this myself. The thing that a lot of language learners experience is that there are so many different strategies to learn a language. There's so many different pieces of advice. So many people say so many different things, and the problem is that people talk from their own experience. So they say, "I learned Spanish by using this app," or "I learned Spanish." This is my favorite one, actually. "I learned Spanish by watching telenovelas." Um, I hate that, advice personally just because I hate telenovelas. They drive me crazy. But a lot of people will say, "I learn a language by reading the dictionary. I learn a language by doing this and this and this." And so you try all these different strategies that all these people recommend, and you get nowhere. And so it is only logical to assume that there's something wrong with you, right? Because everybody else seems to be learning a language, but you can't. Um, and the answer to that is, it's not an easy answer, unfortunately. It's not like something that I could just, like, you know, tell you exactly what to do, when to do it. If only language learning were that simple, then I wouldn't have a job. Um, but it is a matter of finding what works for you, and I know that is a general answer, and I hate having to say that. So that is why I created a new free mini course. It should be in the description of this live stream. Again, this is my first time being live on YouTube. So if there's technical difficulties, if things aren't where I think they are, my bad. But if you go to my website, it's all right there. Specifically, if you go to the search on my website, it's right there. Basically, it'll teach you how to look at. language learning resources through the lens of what you want to do and what you'd like to do and all that kind of stuff. Of course, that is what my full course, The Method, helps teach you, much more in depth than a free course could ever teach, obviously. But that is the first recommendation. If you can't convince yourself to, oh, good, Taste of Spanish. Helen, hi, Helen, found the link. If you can't convince yourself to do it, or you can't convince yourself that you can do it, if you feel like you can't do it, the first thing is to figure out why. Once you figure out why, then you can reverse analyze it. And in the method, that's why the first lesson, the first lesson of the first phase is all about your limiting beliefs. And we target stuff like this. We target stuff like why why you think you can't, or why you think you're too busy, or what fears you have, and solving those fears, and going really in depth with what's going on with you personally, and starting from the root of whatever you're struggling with in language learning, so that once we go through the rest of the course, which is language learning strategies, how to stay consistent, how to have fun learning languages, all that kind of stuff, you're not being stopped by whatever mindset blocks that you're having right now. Okay, because we want to get rid of the mindset blocks. Oh, there's something happening in the chat. Helen's a good friend. Yes, she is. This is one of the biggest things to overcome, mindset. Yes. Oh my God. So huge. Like, yes, learning language itself is hard enough, but if you have some sort of mental obstacle, that will stop you from ever learning. And it's not because you're stupid, and it's not because you're lazy, and it's not because you don't have time or whatever it is. Our mental roadblocks cause so much problem, cause so much strife. So, that is why that is the first thing that we tackle in the method, because if we have obstacles that are stopping us, it does I can give you the best strategies in the world. I can give you the best courses in the world. I could sit with you in front of your face for 24 hours a day, every single day, teaching you a language, and you're still going to get stuck because you haven't dealt with the problem. You haven't dealt with the root of the problem. Okay, so that is question one that I've gotten from 3 different people in the past week. So obviously, this is information that people need to hear. And again, if you have questions, I have the pinned comment has the link to the form that I'm reading from. Okay, next question. How do you not take mistakes personally? Comments. Helen also struggles with mindsets. By W Online, sorry. 24 hours a day, or you Duolingo? Well, I do not do things 24 hours a day. I was exaggerating. How do you learn to not take mistakes personally? This is definitely related to the first question, because a lot of people, they go into language learning and they make mistakes, which is inevitable in language learning. And every single time they do something wrong, they forget a word, use a word wrong. Maybe they're laughed at by other people. And so it really kind of shuts them down. And we get into this habit, we get into this pattern of every time we make a mistake, we stop and we get this negative reinforcement that we're doing it wrong. And when you're learning a language, when you're learning anything new, but especially when you're learning a new language, it is really important to shift that mindset, so that mistakes are a good thing. And this is easier said than done, obviously. I do have a mini course that helps with this, actually, Mastering Mistakes. If you go to the Mastering series on my website, or I believe, link in the description if everything worked out the way that I try to make it work out. Mastering Mistakes will help you with this specific problem. Hi, Sanit. Is that how to pronounce your name? Let me know. So how do you learn to not make mistakes personally? So the idea, like I said, is to stop thinking that mistakes are a bad thing. Okay, mistakes are a good thing, and we have been generally conditioned to mistakes are a bad thing, and mistakes are where you get punished, disciplined, yelled at, embarrassed, humiliated, all sorts of things. And this is an unfortunate thing. Um, and a lot of people are going to always treat it like that. And that's okay. You can't control other people. But what you can do is when you make mistakes, because you will make mistakes, okay? It's to look at them differently and look at them as opportunities for improvement. And coming out of my mouth, that sounds really like after school, especially, and really silly and whatnot. Um, but honestly, being able to make mistakes fearlessly, because every mistake that you make is an opportunity for improvement. Because let's say you're in the scenario when you're trying to have a conversation in your target language, right? You're in a language exchange or you are working with a tutor and you are talking back and forth about, whatever in your target language. And you want to say something and you want to express a certain sentence, phrase, whatever, but you get stuck because you're thinking, "I think this is how you say that, but I'm not entirely sure," right? If you've ever been in that situation, it's a very common situation, I'm in it all the time. I wanna say this thing, I'm not really sure if this is how you say that or use this phrase or use this grammar point, whatever it is. There are 2 options when you're in this scenario. Either A, you can you can, oop, sorry about that. Hold on. Technical difficulties, like I said. You can either follow the idea that you have of, I think this is what I say, that I think this is correct, but I'm not sure. You follow that, even if it could be wrong, you follow it, hoping for the best. And if it was correct, congratulations, it's an amazing day. You did something good. If it's wrong, that is also okay because now you've learned and you can say, okay, so how should I have said that? And that is a way that you learn from your mistakes because mistakes are a chance, are an opportunity to learn improvement and to not be stressed out about that problem in the future conversation. Or if you do the other choice and just like don't say anything, then you don't learn anything because you want to say this thing and then you don't, and then you just don't. And the conversation ends, and then you feel really bad. You feel like, "I wanted to say this thing, but I couldn't." And you miss out on that opportunity to either prove to yourself that you were right all along or learn to do it better the next time. So that's how you don't take mistakes personally. You look at them as opportunities to improve. Okay, so I know that Benny Lewis has said that his goal is to make mistakes, like a certain number of mistakes every day. And while that is an extreme version of that, the concept behind it is true. Is to purposefully make mistakes because you recognize that mistakes are a positive thing, an opportunity to learn. Okay, so what is in the chat? Sunet. Sunet, is that correct? And then Helen in Taste of Spanish says, totally best mistake, saying I was pregnant instead of embarrassed. Yeah, I've done that too. I've done that too. You only have to learn that lesson once. Okay, and then the third question that I have right now is how do you keep going when it feels like you aren't making progress? Again, another super common problem. So, and this is something that I've experienced all the time. You spend all of your time playing on Duolingo or reading a textbook or having conversations, and you look back every once in a while and you say, why am I not fluent yet? Why haven't I learned the language yet? Why am I still struggling? Why aren't I getting better? And if I'm not getting better, what is the point of trying? Right? And then that is a really hard thing to fight. So, this is how do you keep going when it seems like you aren't making progress? Now, when I talk about the method, which enrollment ends on Friday, by the way, so the method is broken up into 3 phases. This is an important way to answer this question. First phase is mindset. So, like I talked about, why you feel like you can't learn language, what's going on. Second phase is methods, so all the strategies and how to choose the strategies that you want. The third phase is metrics. So, and this is where this question is really important because when we are looking for progress, it's really important to specify what metrics you're looking at. So it's really easy, really common to try to start learning a language and try to continue learning a language. And you're looking back and you say, why am I not fluent? Why am I still making these mistakes? Why can't I learn this concept? Why am I still tripping over my words? Why can I still not think in the language? All of these things, all of these metrics that we're looking for to dictate our progress. And so when you still aren't able to do that thing, if you could hear that rain, apologies. It's a hurricane out there, literally. Um, as I was saying, when you are looking back at the progress that you're making and trying to clarify what progress there is, and problem is when you're looking back and you say, okay, am I fluent yet? Okay, am I learning new vocab yet? Am I able to have confident conversations yet? Am I able to think in the language yet? The problem is those are pretty vague statements of progress. And in phase three in metrics, when we talk about what metrics are you looking at for your own language learning? What metrics are you looking at to improve? So, for example, let's say, for example, that you want to be able to think in the language instead of having to translate from the language. And so you are learning all of this vocab, you're memorizing all this vocab and all these translations, and then you do that for a month. And then you look back at your language learning and you say, okay, can I think in the language yet? Can I stop translating? No, I can't. But I'm learning the language, I'm studying the language, I'm learning all this vocab. I should just be able to think these words that I'm learning. What is wrong with me? Why can't I make the progress? Now, the answer to that question, to that specific scenario, is that things that you are doing to learn a language are not matching up with the progress that you are looking for. Okay, so if the progress that you're looking for is to memorize a bunch of words and be able to translate them, then it matches up with what you're doing every day is learning vocab. But if the measure of progress is, let's say, being able to read Harry Potter in your target language, but you're not practicing that, you're practicing watching movies and you're practicing having conversations. And so when you look at those two, like the metric does not match with what you're doing with your time. So, of course, it's going to feel like you're not making any progress. And of course, it's going to feel like it's a waste of time because the thing that you are doing in the moment is not a waste of time, but it's not going to get you the progress that you're looking for because you have to make sure that the progress that you're looking for in your language learning matches up with the activities that you're doing to learn a language. Because there are unlimited ways to learn a language. Okay, there are unlimited things that you can do to learn a language, unlimited ways to use the language. That's why what every language learner needs to do is to get very clear on what progress they're intending to make, what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what they're going to be able to do when after they spend 6 months learning a language, what they're expecting their ability to be like. Because if you're going in saying, I'm going to learn German, and then you do that by watching German TV shows, that's fine. But if you are spending all your time watching German TV shows and the metric that you're looking for to make progress is being able to have conversations, well, you're not practicing having conversations. So that just doesn't make sense. So it's getting really clear on what progress that you're looking to make and making sure that what you're doing day to day matches up with that. And again, that's why phase one of the method isn't just about mental blocks. That is the first lesson. The next lesson goes into the goals that you're trying to make. So when you start looking for progress, you start looking to see how your language learning is growing, you can pinpoint what exactly you're looking for. Because if you don't start with where you're trying to go, then the things that you do to get there, it's not going to match up. Okay. Helen says, makes total sense. Yeah, it's really simple. It's really logical. And that's the point that it's like we're trying to keep it simple. It's not about using the best apps and like, spending your entire day, your entire life learning a language because that's what you're supposed to do. It's about being intentional about how you're spending your time, what skills you're building. Okay. So we have a question from Angela. Her question is, hey there, absolutely love your videos. Thank you. Thank you so much. Currently learning Spanish and I consider myself at an intermediate level. I've been self-taught and I'm thrilled to say that I see improvement in my skills every day. My friends have suggested that since I'm making such progress on my own, there's no need for a tutor or taking classes. So I'm a bit torn. Should I stick to my current learning routine where I practice daily on a Hello Talk in tandem, or should I consider taking classes? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It's a good question. My question for you, Angela, is why is your friend's suggestion to change your routine? Like, is there a reason why? Is there a necessity for you to change your routine? Okay. Um, I want you to focus on your needs, what's working for you, and if it's not working for you. Because friends, family, people on the internet have the best intentions in mind and they have the best goals and they want to help you. But the problem is they only know from their own perspective and experience. Okay? So that's where I come in. That's where I come in. That's my job. So I've been around the internet, I've been working with language learners, been working with clients forever, and I have learned to separate myself from um, separate what I think somebody should do to learn a language from what other people actually need. So, to answer your question, Angela, I would say that if there is a reason why you feel like you need more direction, if you need a teacher or a coach or a mentor or something like that to support you and give you more direction, give you some hand holding, maybe give you more professional practice, if it's something that you think will be beneficial to your language learning for no other reason except for you have a need that needs to be met, go for it. But if you are happy, you said you're using Hello Talk in tandem. If you are happy with that, if you are making the progress that you need to make, which you say you are in the question, and if there are no problems, then I would say to your friends, thank you for the recommendation, but this is working for me. And so there's no reason for me to change what is working for me. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Again, our friends, our family have our best interests at heart. And a lot of people will be very stubborn about this is how I learn a language. And so this is how you should learn a language. There are many people on the internet who come from this perspective of, oh my God, this is how I learn a language. This is amazing. And so this is how everyone should. And that's just not true. If it's working for you and you don't have any need for any change in strategy and you're finding progress, then there's no reason to change the strategy. Okay. Let me know in the chat if that helps. I see that Maraku, I believe. Let me know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Submitted a question. Let's see. I don't see it yet, I don't think, but I do see one from Helen. Helen says, how long should it take a learner to improve their spoken Spanish so they can have normal everyday conversations with the native speaker? Good question. The problem is, unfortunately, I'm not a big fan of the simple answers to questions because they're generally wrong. It There is no should, okay? So every language learner is different. It depends on how much time you have and how much time you want to spend improving their spoken Spanish. Okay, so even if you have 3 hours free every single day, I'm not suggesting that you use those 3 hours. You're allowed to have other hobbies, you're allowed to take care of yourself, you're allowed to rest, you're allowed to spend time with friends and family, whatever. I would focus less on how much time it's taking, and I know this is really difficult because especially here on YouTube, everybody loves to brag about how, how it only took a certain amount of time or whatever it is. Um, but talking about metrics like we talked about in a previous question, the time it takes you to do something is not going to be a very helpful metric, and that is because you cannot control it. It is not something that's within your control. If you spend, let's say, a month having conversations in Spanish, and then you look back and you say, "Oh, I'm not making enough progress." Well, that's generally not helpful. Um, if there is a thing like, "Oh, I want to like like I'm making zero progress," then that's something that we can look at. But when you're looking at the progress that you've made and you're saying, this isn't happening fast enough, how can I make this happen quicker? We need to change that mindset so that we're not constantly judging ourselves for how quickly we're able to learn something, because that's not something that's within our control. So we need to be taking our focus and our perspective off of how long something is taking and instead focus on what is happening. And if what is happening matches up with what your intention is, with what you're looking to happen. And as I said before, if the progress that you're making matches up with your intention, then I would really recommend you find acceptance in that and stop trying to be the fastest or stop trying to, learn as quickly as you can. Um, but also, if that is something that you want to do, I'm not the right person to talk to. There are many people who will, have you intensively crunch through a language, and it sucks and it's not fun, but you'll have conversations, I guess. But if speed and going as fast as you can and being as quick as you can is something that's really important to you, um, I will say you're not going to have fun. You're not going to enjoy it. It's not going to be useful. Oh, I am sorry. I need to move my mouse more. Okay. So I think um uh Maraku, I still see your question, I believe. Hold on, I'm looking. Give me 1 second. Um no, I'm not saying. Okay. So, but I did get a response from Angela. Angela says, it's possible that what works for others may not necessarily work for me. That is true. As we all have different learning styles, I successfully learned English and Japanese on my own, and I'm currently applying the same approach to learning Spanish. However, I occasionally find myself wondering if having a tutor could potentially accelerate my progress. Nonetheless, I want to emphasize I'm already satisfied with the results I've achieved so far. Okay. So in that case, if you want to try working with a tutor, by all means. If it's something that you're curious about and you haven't really experienced it at all, um, there's no harm in trying, right? Um, that's all I would say about that. If it's something that's you're really curious about, I would first of all get really clear on what your expectations are with a tutor. Um, and then be able to go into that session with a tutor with that expectations in mind and see how you feel about, do I feel more supported or do I feel like I have the structure that I'm looking for? Whatever those things are, being really intentional about working with the tutor and going through with that, and I'm really glad that you found strategies that work for you. That's amazing to hear. I would say, like I said, if you're curious, go ahead and be curious. There's nothing wrong with that. You may learn something new. You may learn that that's actually a better way for you to learn languages right now, because that's the thing that, you say that you've successfully learned English and Japanese with the same approach. That's amazing. I know me personally, I do not take the same approach with every language just because my goals with every language are different. And so for me, I can't apply the same strategies to every language, and that's okay. Also, the other two things that will change how your language strategies go. The first one is um, how you change over time. So your your personality changes, your life changes, your lifestyle changes, your the time that you have available changes, and that will all directly affect your language learning strategy. So if you have less time, or if you are more emotionally exhausted, or if you know, whatever it is, that can change your approach to learning a language. So that can change over time. So a strategy that may have worked for Japanese, for example, 10 years ago, may not necessarily work for, was it Spanish now? Just as a general example, that and you as a person change over time, right? So things that you enjoyed in the past, you may not enjoy now. And that's fine, but that changes your strategy. So being aware that these changes are, um, they exist and they affect your language learning strategy. And then, so if you go into another language, if you've already learned a language with one strategy and you go into another language with that same strategy and you're disappointed, is to not take that personally and say, you know, what's wrong with me? Woo, I'm a mess over here today. Um, and just kind of accept it as data. So, like I was saying in phase 3 of the method, metrics, it's all about taking the data, taking what your expectations are, what your life looks like, what, you know, how your expectations relate to what actually happens. Because, you know, are your expectations too high, too low, just right? It needs to be a little bit different. Because taking that information, as opposed to taking everything that goes wrong to heart and seriously, um, will help your language learning so much, because language learning is just data. Okay, Maraku, I believe. Let me know if I said that right. Your question finally came through. Okay. Your question is, how do we know what works for us, for example, on the internet? There are a lot of people that they're saying, for example, story learning is the best method. Listening to podcasts is the best method. And to be honest, sometimes I feel that they are trying to sell their program or something, because I think that reading, listening, all these things, we have to use them not only one way. So how can we know what will really help us? That is a beautiful question. So there are two ways to go about this, okay? Because yes, you're right. There are so many different people who will say so many things, and a good percentage of them are just trying to sell you something. Whether or not it will help you, I hate to say it, but in my experience, I feel like people are more concerned with selling you their program than they are with making sure it actually helps you. Because, yeah, marketing sucks. Um, so there are two ways to go about this. The first way is to just try all these different resources and hope for the best and learn what works for you, what you enjoy, what is actually helpful for you, what is sustainable for you in your life, all sorts of things. And like I said, taking that data and applying that long term. So if you use, for example, I think you use story learning, Ollie Richards, very expensive, great marketing. If you try story learning, for example, and you realize, wow, I hate this. And I hate this because I don't actually want to learn a language like this, because this particular method is really boring to me. Okay, what is boring about it? What could change about it for it to be more interesting to me? Just taking that data, and applying that, instead of just, you know, trying it and then saying, wow, this sucks. Okay, let me try something else. Well, that sucks. Let me try something else. Well, that sucks. Because that is a thing that we all do sometimes. And as I mentioned, you know, the method phase 2 is all about strategies. It starts out with a lesson on shiny object syndrome, which means basically if something is working well for you, and you say, "Oh, well, maybe I'll try this one because this is a really great deal. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity or whatever." And learning how to differentiate between what is actually like an educated decision and which one is just impulsive and you're honestly going to spend your like waste your time and money and energy on something that you don't actually need because, as Angela was talking about, what if a tutor might actually be helpful? It's recognizing whether or not you need to try out this strategy or whether or not it's just shiny object syndrome and you're actually perfectly happy the way that you are, and your brain is just doing the thing where it wants you to like solve a problem basically. And there's a whole I believe that's actually the longest lesson in the method, and that's like 15 minutes, but that really goes into um, being clear on whether something will actually help you or if you're just kind of feeling impulsive and uncomfortable and impatient. So the second thing that you could do, because honestly, going through, there are literally unlimited language learning resources. I get emails from people saying, because they find my app search and they really like how I review apps. And they say, "Oh, I couldn't find this one," and it's something that I never heard of, just because it's essentially impossible for me to find every single app, every single resource. I can only do my best. Um, but it'll honestly take forever to go through all these resources, and some of them are really expensive. Some of them will break the bank. Um, and you don't know if they're actually going to help you. Um, I have the solution to this problem. It is the method. It is my core. Oh, I am sorry. This lighting. I get distracted talking, and I forget to like move my mouse to keep my monitor awake. The monitor that I was trying to use for this live stream, but gave me a lot of technical difficulties. Anyways, so the method, that is exactly what the method is meant to do. Okay. So again, 3 phases real quick. First phase is mindset. So it's understanding if there's anything holding you back from learning a language, and fixing that, plus what your goals are. So what progress will look like for you and what you want to achieve in your language learning. Phase 2 is methods. So like I said, the very first lesson in that is shiny object syndrome. So how do you know if you are if you are trying a new resource because you need it, or if you're just getting distracted by good marketing or impatience or, any number of things. And then the rest of it is like literally every language learning strategy there is. Because while there are new language learning resources like every single day, the strategies don't change. Okay, the strategies are exactly the same and they have always been exactly the same. And I can teach you that. That is what I teach my clients is these are the strategies that exist to learn a language. They're the same strategies that have always existed. They're not new, they're exactly the same. Even apps and resources and courses that say, "Oh, this amazing new modern brand new language learning strategy," it's not new. That's marketing. Every strategy, there's no new ways, okay? There are different ways to make it accessible. There are different ways to, provide access to that, but the strategies themselves are the same. And so taking those base strategies and being able to look at language learning resources and say, "Okay, so this is this strategy and this strategy and this strategy," completely wipes out, like, for example, if story learning is not going to be helpful for you at all, like it's not even close to what you're looking for in a language learning resource, it makes it that easy to say, "Oh, that's expensive and I don't need that. So let me focus on literally anything else that will be beneficial to me." And then phase 3, metrics, like we talked about, like seeing progress and how do we know like what happens if we're not making the progress that we want to be making. That metrics is all about looking at that and saying, "Okay, is this working for you? And if it's not, what can we do to make it work like from here on?" Looking at what you've been doing for the past week, month, 6 months, whatever, and being able to take an objective, logical look at it and say, "Oh, okay, so this is working, but this isn't, and here is exactly how this needs to change." So instead of saying, "Oh my god, none of this works, so let me try another app," and, waste all this time and money being stressed out, being overwhelmed, thinking there's something wrong with you. Nope, we can keep it simple. So that is why the method is honestly the best option for that. I may be biased. I am biased, but also because I know how necessary a course like this is in our modern day language learning industry. Because I spent like 15 years struggling with this same exact question. How do you know what works best? How do you know if, they're being truthful or if it's just marketing? How do I know that like if I need to change my strategy? The method will teach you all of that. And it's in a self-contained 3-month. And by 3 months, by the way, it's not like you're sitting in front of a computer for like 40 hours a week. On average, the videos are like 10 minutes. And you can just like listen to them. Okay. Maraku, I believe is how to pronounce your name. Asked another question. Thank you very much for answering. You're welcome. I have another question. How can we organize language exchange sessions? Ooh, good question. I really like talking in the language that I'm learning, but how can we get the most of a language exchange session? Very good question. So, language exchanges. If you're not familiar with what a language exchange is, it's so for example, if I like obviously my native language is English, and if I were learning Vietnamese off the top of my head, and I could find somebody who speaks Vietnamese natively and is learning English, and we would have conversations where we exchange our languages. So the question is, how do we organize language exchange sessions? Now, this depends so much on you and your partner and your goals, your personalities, like so many different factors. But what I would recommend first and foremost is to have a conversation with your partner, with your language exchange partner, and be very clear on your expectations. So there are different ways to organize it. So for example, if you want to sit down for an hour and then you get to practice your target language for 30 minutes and they get to practice their target language for 30 minutes. Or for example, if you want to meet once a week and you decide that 1 week you get to practice and 1 week they get to practice, or if it's like a combination of the two, or if, some days you're going to have your language exchanges and your brain is just not going to want to do anything. Okay. It's not going to want to speak. And in those situations, it could be really easy to say, "Hey, I am not feeling good, but I'm happy to support you talking in my native language that requires zero effort. I am happy to support you so that, one day in the future when you are feeling really tired and your brain isn't working, I can talk for an hour." You know, um, and it's really about keeping the communication open with your language exchange partner, which I know can be difficult sometimes, especially cultural, with methods of communication. I I definitely experienced this when I've had language exchanges in Spain, and just communication strategies are just very different. Um, it's all about keeping that line of communication open and saying, "Hey, like I want to like meet up more, or I can't meet up as much, or I'm really tired from a long week of work, or whatever it is." That is my best recommendation for that particular question. There's things in the chat. Okay. Helen, Taste of Spanish says, sounds like the shiny object syndrome could be useful in lots of different areas of life too. Yes, yes, 100%. And honestly, the things that you learn in the method can be applied to so many other parts of life, honestly. Like my clients in the past have been like, wow, all of a sudden, not only do I know how to learn a language, but I'm more confident in general. Just because like I learned how to like fix mindsets about my ability to do things and like making mistakes and all these things. Okay. Andrew said, "What's the best way to stay motivated?" Well, that is a question, isn't it? Um, so I do have a mini course on this for it's called Mastering Motivation if you find it on my website. Just because this anybody who gives you a very simple answer to this is probably selling you something that you don't need, to be completely honest. Because the thing is everybody gets motivated by different things in different ways. And also, and this is a little sneak peek for mastering motivation. Motivation is an emotion, right? Logical. And the thing is, we cannot control our emotions. Motivation is not something that we can necessarily rely on because we don't know what we're going to be feeling day to day. And so depending on, you know, I'm guessing based on the question that you are looking for that initial rush of motivation you get when you start learning a language. That first motivation of, oh my God, I'm going to learn every single day. And this is so exciting. And I love to do this. And so you sit down for like 2 hours and you study and you feel great. And then that disappears, right? Because motivation is an emotion, and emotion is temporary. It's not something that we can control. And so, depending on that motivation, will always leave you disappointed because we cannot depend on our emotions to be exactly what we want them to be, exactly when we want them to be that. So, that is my recommendation. And I know it's not an easy answer. It really depends on I really recommend my clients to focus on other things besides motivation because motivation will come and go, right? It's going to come and go, and we cannot rely on motivation. So, we can take those really motivating days and run with them. Like, if we want to sit down and, practice for 3 hours because we're feeling really motivated that day, there's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong is expecting that level of motivation and commitment and energy every single day. We have to take a step back and manage our expectations to keep them realistic. Because if we have unrealistic expectations of motivation, then we're going to fail every single time. And I say that as somebody who's done that. I say that as somebody who's gotten really like obsessed with learning languages for like 3 days and being really disappointed when that motivation just goes away because it will eventually. Is a temporary emotion. But yeah, I would recommend Mastering Motivation, my mini course. I believe it's linked in the description. It's also on my website if you go to the mastering series, multilingualmastery.com/the mastering series. Oh my goodness. I'm getting so distracted talking. Okay. Stuff in the chat. My experience as an English speaker is we'll end up speaking English most of the time. Setting up a plan is probably a good way to balance it. Yeah, I've definitely had that experience too. And it really depends. It's also a confidence thing for sure. Because when we have conversations in our target language, when we get stuck and we get very tired of trying to, I mean, because having a conversation in a foreign language is really hard. It's really hard, and sometimes we can just get stuck. And so, especially as native English speakers, it's very easy to fall back to that English for sure because a lot of the times, their English is going to be a lot better. Um, With that, I would say just keep practicing, honestly, because there is nothing better. I remember one language exchange I had while in Spain. Um, it was a completely random day, and that day, for whatever reason, my Spanish was stronger than their English was. So instead of spending that hour speaking English and me feeling really guilty and bad about it, I actually spent the entire hour speaking in Spanish because they're just like, my English, I am not confident with it. Um, and just like motivation, confidence will change from day to day. And I was feeling really confident in my Spanish that day. So I just took over that conversation in Spanish. And that was one of my most memorable favorite language exchanges. Okay, taste of Spanish. That's what I do with my German language exchange. Sometimes one of us is too tired to think properly in the other language, but we tend to keep it as even as possible, aiming for 50-50 time each. Yeah. Um it's not every conversation is going to look the same because we are not the same every single day. Sometimes we'll have more energy, sometimes we'll have more confidence. Sometimes sometimes the language will come out easy, and sometimes it won't. and there's no rhyme or reason. Brains are very fickle organs. So just kind of accepting that it's not going to be the same every single time and not taking it personally and just accepting, okay, you know what, today it's just, I'm just, nope, it's not going to happen. I'm happy to support you in my native language, but my brain is tired or I'm distracted or I have other things going on in life and I just can't. And that's okay. And that's totally okay. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel like you're wasting your time because rest is important too. Okay. Andrew. Andrew, you should be submitting questions through the pinned chat, that form, but since I can keep track of the chat right now, in other streams when maybe the chat is too busy and I miss your questions, that's what the form is for. But how can I effectively use a teacher for language learning? Good question. We talked about that before with Angela, in a slightly different context. Really focus on, oh man, next time I won't have as many technical difficulties. I would really focus on getting clear on what your intentions are with your language learning and with your teacher. What are your goals? Because when you work with a language teacher, they generally have their own approach to teaching, which is fine. That's great. Especially because most, if not all, of their students come to them and they're like, I have no idea what I want to learn, so just teach me whatever. And that's their job, is to provide that structure and give them like, okay, this is the path that I'm going to give you. And whether or not, I mean, in that way, language teachers are the same exact way as apps and courses. They're just, okay, this is a strategy that I teach. This is my path that I teach. So I'm going to take you down this path. I'm going to take you down this journey. And many language learners end up unhappy because they don't know what their path is. And the path that that particular teacher takes and teaches with their students is not the right path for them. And that doesn't mean the teacher is bad. That doesn't mean the teacher is wrong. That doesn't mean that you are bad or wrong or that you're learning wrong. But it's really important that you are clear about what is it that you want to learn and how you want to learn it. Because I know that I've had experiences with teachers who, I had one who was teaching me through poetry. And I didn't realize it at the time. Um, but there is nothing about poetry that's interesting to me at all. And I mean, I knew that, but I didn't realize that that was giving me an obstacle, another obstacle for learning the language, because a teacher was taking me through this poetry that, yeah, technically, it's teaching me the language, but I hated doing it and it was so difficult and there was nothing really good coming out of it from my side. But I didn't have the experience or the language or the self-awareness to be able to say, "Hey, this isn't how I want to learn." Um, and so being very clear on your goals, your intentions, and the ways that you would be comfortable achieving those, um, will give you the best bang for your buck with teachers. Absolutely 100%. Because a way that a lot of people get very disappointed with language teachers is, like I said, language teachers have their own strategy, have their own path that like they like to teach their students like, and if it's not a good match, that's perfectly okay. But you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of that and say, "Hey, like this isn't how I want to learn. This is how I want to learn." Or even if you don't know how you want to learn, say, "This isn't how I want to learn because I don't like this, or I don't feel comfortable with this, or this is boring to me, or this would be more interesting to me, this would be more motivating to me." Having that self-awareness and being able to communicate that, um, I would say is the first step in saying and being able to tell a teacher, this is what I want to learn. This is how I want to learn it. Can you help me with that? Would be the best way to spend your time and your money wisely. Um BY, unfortunately, I have to go. Have a nice dream. You're doing well. Thank you for joining us. I loved having you here. Igor, I love your content. Thanks for all advice. I am so glad it's helpful for you. Um, Helen takes the Spanish says a good teacher will always accept feedback between lessons and about what you would like to see more slash less of in the lesson. Yes, 100%. Like I said with language exchanges, it's all about communication. Being able to tell your teacher, your language exchange partner, your friends, Angela, whose friends were trying to get you to work with a teacher. It's all about being able to communicate that, like, hey, these are my needs, and this is what I need for my language learning. Can you support me in that? And if you can't, that's okay. I'm going to go somewhere else. Oh, you can support me in that. That's great. That's awesome. Our relationship is going to be so much better with this. If you're approaching a language exchange, you say, hey, I need to take a break today. And I need to not have to work so hard to have a conversation right now just because my brain is not there. If your language exchange partner is going to guilt you about that and say, hey, I want this to be a useful use of your time, with all the best intentions, of course. But if they say, hey, that's not acceptable, I don't want to take over the time, we need to have a strict 50-50. If they can't accept that feedback, then you may need to go a different direction, and that's okay. It's all about being clear on what you want and being able to communicate to the people that you're working with to get you there. Because if you don't, I don't like to say anything to do with language learning is a waste of time, but you're not going to be able to use your time the most efficiently to your advantage. So, yeah, wow. I cannot believe this lasted an hour. Thank you so much for your questions, everybody. Today is the 30th, and so the enrollment for the method closes soon on Friday midnight Eastern Standard Time. I've talked about it a little bit in this live stream so far, just because so many of your questions are directly answered by the course. But also, if it's too much of a commitment for you right now, I also talked about mastering motivation and mastering mistakes as well. And I have so many resources that can directly answer these questions. If you have more questions, please feel free to send me an email or, yeah, it's probably best, multilingualmastery@gmail.com. Enrollment closes Friday, Eastern Standard Time, midnight. And it'll start on the 1st if you join before then. If you have any questions, please let me know. Happy to answer them. Thank you so much for joining. And I will see you next Wednesday. I won't be live, but my goal is to have a YouTube video go out next week at the normal time. So thank you so much for joining and have a great day, week, what have you. Bye.